The steel target gleamed at 4,200 meters, an impossible distance that mocked human ambition. Nobody alive can consistently hit that, Master Sergeant Victor Grimwald declared, his voice dripping with the kind of certainty that only comes from decades of crushing dreams. That's why we call it the Humbler. 20 elite marksmen nodded in solemn agreement, their eyes squinting at the distant speck of metal that seemed to dance in the desert heat. Before continuing this story, please comment below with your city or country where you're watching from. Your feedback inspires us to do better. None of them noticed the lone figure on the ridge, 4,200 meters away, methodically setting up equipment with the precision of a surgeon preparing for a life-saving operation. In the heartbeat between Grimwald's smug smile and his next breath, the target erupted into a shower of metallic fragments. Confusion rippled through the assembled trainees like a stone thrown into still water. They hadn't even heard a shot. 4 seconds later, the distinctive crack of a high-powered rifle rolled across the valley like distant thunder. Grimwald's weathered face went pale as parchment. "Christ almighty," he whispered, the words barely audible. "She's back." The morning sun blazed across the Mojave Elite Training Facility, painting the desert landscape in shades of copper and gold. Captain Elena "Ghost" Vasquez had been helping a nervous recruit adjust his scope when the world decided to remind her that some injustices never truly heal. They just wait for the right moment to reopen old wounds. "Easy there, Martinez," Elena said softly, her calloused hands steady on the young man's rifle. Private Danny Martinez was the kind of kid who reminded her why she'd stayed in the service. All nerves and determination, with enough heart to make up for his shaking hands. "Breathing's everything at this distance. Rush the shot, and you're just throwing expensive ammunition at empty air." Martinez nodded gratefully, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed his anxiety. "Thank you, ma'am. I want to make my family proud, you know?" "You will," Elena assured him, adjusting his bipod legs with practiced efficiency. "Your fundamentals are solid. Trust the process." That's when Master Sergeant Victor Grimwald's shadow fell across their shooting mat like a bad omen dressed in desert camouflage. "Well, well," Grimwald's voice carried the kind of condescension that could strip paint from a Humvee. "If it isn't our resident charity case, playing nursemaid to the weak again." Elena looked up slowly, her dark eyes meeting his with practiced neutrality. At 32, she'd learned to blend into any environment. Average height, black hair pulled back in regulation style, the kind of unremarkable appearance that had once made her invaluable to certain classified operations. But those who looked closer might notice how her gaze constantly scanned for threats, how her hands never strayed far from potential weapons. "Just helping a fellow soldier improve his marksmanship, Sergeant," she replied evenly. "Helping?" Grimwald's laugh was as sharp as broken glass. "Maybe you should stick to what you're actually qualified for instead of pretending to be something you never were." The barb hit its mark, just as Grimwald intended. Elena's jaw tightened imperceptibly, but she maintained her composure. Around them, other instructors and trainees had gone quiet, sensing the familiar electricity that preceded one of Grimwald's public humiliations. "Last I checked, marksmanship instruction was part of my assigned duties," Elena said carefully. "Your assigned duties," Grimwald emphasized the words with theatrical contempt, "are whatever I say they are. And right now, I say you're done playing sniper instructor." He turned to address the assembled trainees, his voice carrying across the range. "Gentlemen, gather around. Time for a reality check from someone who's actually accomplished something in this profession." As the marksman reluctantly moved toward Grimwald's position, Elena caught sight of a familiar figure approaching from the command building. Colonel Marcus Steele walked with the measured gait of someone who'd spent decades in harm's way, his silver hair and weathered features testament to years of hard decisions in harder places. "Today we separate the legends from the liars," Grimwald announced, gesturing toward the distant target that shimmered in the heat mirage. "Physics doesn't care about your feelings, and neither do I. That steel plate sitting pretty at 4,200 meters? Most of you can barely make out what it is, let alone hit it." Elena remained at her position with Martinez, continuing to work on his fundamentals while Grimwald held court. But her attention was split. Part of her monitoring the young recruit's progress, part watching Colonel Steele's approach with growing unease. No human alive can hit that target consistently, Grimwald continued, his voice gaining momentum like a preacher warming to his sermon. I've seen supposed legends come and go. Hell, I've trained most of them. But physics is physics, gentlemen. Distance is distance. And fairy tales are just that. Fairy tales. Specialist Jacob Hawk Morrison, a lean observer with intelligent eyes, noticed when Elena quietly began packing her equipment. Unlike the others who hung on Grimwald's every word, Hawk had been watching Elena work with the struggling recruits, noting the way she moved with uncommon efficiency and the subtle modifications to her personal gear that spoke of real-world experience. As Elena walked toward the vehicle staging area, fragments of memory flashed through her mind like lightning strikes. A sterile conference room where medals were stripped from her uniform, newspaper headlines screaming about operational failures and compromised missions. 5 flag-draped coffins arranged in perfect formation while she stood at attention, bearing the weight of blame that belonged to others. Her hands clenched briefly into fists before she forced them to relax. Today, she decided, the truth would have its moment. 3 miles from the training ground, Elena methodically established her position on a rocky outcrop that offered clear sight lines to both the training area and Grimwald's impossible target. The vantage point was perfect, concealed from casual observation but with unobstructed fields of fire. From a weathered case bearing faded foreign military markings, she removed the components of a rifle system that didn't appear in any standard military inventory. The weapon was a masterpiece of precision engineering, its parts sourced from specialized manufacturers across 4 continents and assembled by someone who understood that perfection was the minimum acceptable standard. She put it together with the fluid efficiency of someone who could perform the task blindfolded in a sandstorm, which, in fact, she had done on more than one occasion in places that officially didn't exist on any map. Through her high-powered spotting scope, Elena observed Grimwald continuing his theatrical lesson, gesturing dramatically at the impossible target while trainees struggled with much closer objectives. She watched as Colonel Steele paced nearby, occasionally glancing toward the surrounding ridgelines with the alertness of a man who knew trouble usually came from unexpected directions. As Elena assembled her rifle, her fingers traced 5 names etched into the custom stock. Call signs of operators who never returned from Operation Midnight Sun. The memory surfaced unbidden. Night vision goggles illuminating a compound that shouldn't have been there according to their intelligence. Enemy forces somehow prepared for their exact approach. Radio communications mysteriously dead when they called for extraction. They told us it was a rescue mission, she whispered to herself, watching Steele through her scope. But we were never meant to come back, were we, Colonel? With preternatural focus, Elena calculated the complex variables that would affect a shot at this extreme distance. Wind speed and direction at multiple elevations. She counted at least 3 distinct air currents. Temperature gradients that would affect bullet trajectory. Humidity, barometric pressure, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, even the spin drift of the bullet as it traveled its long arc through the atmosphere. She made minute adjustments to her scope and rifle configuration, compensating for factors that most snipers didn't even know existed. The target occasionally disappeared in heat waves rising from the valley floor, requiring patience that transcended normal human limitations. Elena's breathing slowed to a controlled rhythm. 4 seconds in, hold for 4, 4 seconds out. Her heart rate decreased through deliberate autonomic control until it barely registered 40 beats per minute. The world around her narrowed to 3 essential points: herself, the rifle, and the distant target. Below, Specialist Morrison completed his assigned shots and returned to the observation area. Unlike the others who watched Grimwald's continuing lecture with rapt attention, Morrison scanned the surrounding ridgelines, his instincts telling him something was happening beyond the scheduled training. Some claim the record for confirmed kills in combat was just over 3,400 meters, Grimwald was saying, his voice carrying across the training ground. I say that's statistical anomaly and blind luck, not skill. You want to be professionals? Focus on consistent performance at achievable distances. Elena finished her calculations, making final adjustments for the crosswind that had just picked up from the northwest. Her breathing slowed even further as she settled into position behind the rifle, becoming one with the weapon and the earth beneath her. Years of training in places where failure meant death had taught her to read the environment like others read books. On the training ground, Grimwald had gathered the trainees around him for his concluding remarks. Listen carefully, because this might save your life someday. Know your limitations. Don't attempt shots you can't make consistently. He gestured grandly toward the distant target. That steel plate out there at 4,200 meters, the impossible shot. It's there to remind you that some things remain beyond human capability, no matter what legends claim. A black SUV with government plates pulled up to the edge of the training area. Colonel Steele moved quickly to greet its occupants, and Elena watched through her scope as General Patricia Hawthorne emerged, flanked by two serious-looking aides carrying secure tablets. Some legends claim there was once a shooter who could hit targets at this distance, Grimwald continued, unaware of the general's arrival. Ghost, they called her. Supposedly made confirmed kills at ranges that defy physics. He chuckled dismissively. But ghosts aren't real, gentlemen, and neither are fairy tales about impossible shots. Trust the science, trust your training, and never bet lives on myths. Elena entered an almost meditative state, the world falling away until there existed only the trinity of precision: shooter, weapon, target. She took one final measured breath, held it at the precise moment between heartbeats when her body was most still, and squeezed the trigger with perfect, consistent pressure. The rifle discharged, its recoil absorbed efficiently by Elena's positioning and the weapon's custom compensation system. Through her scope, she tracked the bullet's path as it began its journey across the valley, cutting through layers of air density, riding wind currents, fighting gravity's pull in a carefully calculated trajectory that would take it on a 4-second journey across time and space. At the training range, Grimwald was mid-sentence when the steel target erupted with a metallic crash that echoed across the valley like a thunderclap. Fragments of steel scattered in all directions, the plate not merely struck, but utterly obliterated by the precision of the impact. For a moment, confused silence fell over the group like a heavy blanket. The trainees looked around in bewilderment, some dropping instinctively to prone positions, others reaching for weapons while scanning for threats. No one had fired, and they hadn't even heard a shot. 4 seconds later, the distinctive boom of a high-powered rifle rolled across the training ground, the sound delayed by the vast distance it had traveled. "Clear the range," Steele shouted, suddenly alert as chaos erupted among the trainees. "Everyone to the bunker now." But General Hawthorne remained calmly in place, looking not at the shattered target but toward the distant ridgeline with something like recognition in her eyes. "Delay that order," the general said quietly, her voice carrying absolute authority. "No one is in immediate danger here." Grimwald finally broke his stunned silence, his face having gone from tanned leather to pale parchment. "General, we have an unknown shooter with capabilities beyond anything I've ever witnessed. We need to lock down this entire facility and call in a quick reaction force." "The shooter isn't unknown to me, Sergeant," Hawthorne replied calmly. She nodded to one of her aides, who began distributing sealed folders to the senior personnel present. "And after you read this, she won't be unknown to you either." General Hawthorne's voice cut through the commotion like a blade through silk. 3 years ago, a classified operation called Midnight Sun was compromised by someone in this command structure. 6 operators went in. 1 came back. 5 died. Grimwald's expression shifted from shock to something that might have been guilty recognition, his eyes darting toward the distant ridgeline where the impossible shot had originated. "That survivor," Hawthorne continued, nodding as her aide distributed the sealed folders, "was falsely blamed for the mission failure. Until yesterday, when new evidence came to light. The senior instructors opened their folders with growing disbelief. Security footage appeared on tablets showing Grimwald meeting with unidentified individuals in civilian clothes days before the failed operation. Bank records detailed financial transfers to offshore accounts. Communication logs revealed classified operational details being transmitted through encrypted channels that bypassed official oversight. As comprehension dawned among the assembled staff, Grimwald's hand moved toward his sidearm with the desperate motion of a cornered animal. Before anyone could react, a red laser dot appeared, centered precisely on his chest. "I wouldn't," General Hawthorne said with deadly calm. Captain Vasquez has already demonstrated her capabilities today. I suspect her next shot would be considerably more personal. Two military police officers emerged from the command building and took positions on either side of Grimwald, who stood rigid with a mixture of fury and fear. "Sir," Specialist Morrison asked quietly, having edged closer to the general during the confrontation. "Who is she? Who's Captain Vasquez?" General Hawthorne's voice carried across the suddenly silent range with the weight of absolute authority. "Captain Elena Vasquez, the most decorated marksman in special operations history, until we betrayed her." The general turned to address the assembled trainees, her expression grave. 3 years ago, Captain Vasquez led a 6-person team on Operation Midnight Sun, a high-priority extraction mission. Intelligence suggested American hostages were being held in a remote compound in Eastern Europe. Hawthorne's voice hardened as she continued. Upon infiltration, they discovered not hostages, but a carefully prepared ambush. 5 operators were killed in action. Captain Vasquez survived through extraordinary skill and determination, fighting her way out against overwhelming odds and carrying classified intelligence that prevented an even greater catastrophe. The weight of the revelation settled over the training ground like desert dust after a sandstorm. When she returned, Hawthorne continued, rather than receiving proper medical treatment and recognition for her heroism, she was accused of negligence and operational failure. Evidence was fabricated. Her security clearance was revoked, her medals stripped, her career destroyed. Colonel Steele stepped forward, his military bearing stiff with formal protocol. "Why is she here now, General?" "Because yesterday, intelligence assets recovered this." Hawthorne held up a data drive that gleamed in the desert sun. Indisputable evidence that Master Sergeant Grimwald sold out that team. He provided mission details to foreign interest for financial gain, resulting in the deaths of 5 operators and the near-catastrophic compromise of ongoing operations. Grimwald, still with the red laser dot trained on his chest, finally found his voice. "You have no proof that will stand up in any court. I know how this works. I'll be quietly discharged, maybe serve minimal time in some minimum security facility. These things get buried." "They always do." "Not this time," General Hawthorne replied with ice in her voice. "Captain Vasquez didn't just bring us evidence of your treason. She brought us the names of everyone involved in the conspiracy. The entire network is being rolled up as we speak." At that moment, a transport helicopter appeared over the ridge where Elena had positioned herself. As the trainees watched in fascination, the aircraft touched down briefly before ascending again, now carrying a passenger. "Specialist Morrison," the general said, "assemble the trainees in the main briefing room in 30 minutes. They deserve to hear the full truth of what happened 3 years ago and why it matters to their training." As the trainees filed toward the facility buildings, Grimwald was escorted away in handcuffs by the military police, his decades of authority reduced to nothing more than the metallic clink of restraints. General Hawthorne remained in place, watching the helicopter approach the landing pad. "Colonel Steele," she said without turning, "you've been conspicuously silent since we arrived." Steele swallowed visibly. "General, I was just following protocol when I reported Captain Vasquez's presence on the facility." "Indeed. And 3 years ago, were you also just following protocol when you delayed the rescue team that might have saved those 5 operators?" Before Steele could respond, Hawthorne continued with devastating precision. "Captain Vasquez provided quite detailed records, Colonel. Records that include your communications with Grimwald before, during, and after Midnight Sun." Steele's hand moved subtly toward his sidearm, but before he could draw the weapon, Morrison tackled him from behind with the instinctive reaction of someone who'd been watching and learning. The pistol clattered to the ground as Morrison efficiently secured the colonel's wrists with zip restraints. "Excellent reflexes, Specialist," Hawthorne noted with approval. "My sister was on that team, General," Morrison replied, his voice tight with controlled emotion. "Call sign Raptor. Elena Vasquez saved her life twice before she couldn't anymore." Recognition flashed in the general's eyes. "Sarah Morrison, one of our finest communications specialists. I didn't make the connection until now. I enlisted after her death, ma'am. Requested assignment to this facility specifically." Hawthorne nodded thoughtfully. Then you'll want to be present for what comes next. The helicopter touched down on the landing pad with precision that spoke of an exceptional pilot. Elena Vasquez emerged from the aircraft, rifle case slung across her shoulder, moving with the fluid economy that marked elite operators. She covered ground quickly despite the heavy equipment she carried, her gait efficient and purposeful. Two security personnel flanked her as she approached General Hawthorne, their presence more ceremonial than protective. Everyone present understood that Elena herself was the most dangerous person on the base. "Captain," Hawthorne greeted her with a crisp salute, which Elena returned with military precision. "Impressive demonstration." "Thank you, General," Elena replied, her voice clear and controlled. "Though I had ideal conditions. Light crosswind, stable temperature, excellent visibility. Don't diminish the achievement. No one else here could have made that shot." Hawthorne's expression grew serious. "We've secured Grimwald and Steele. The files you provided have been verified, and additional arrests are underway across 3 continents." Elena nodded once, her expression revealing nothing of the emotions churning beneath the surface. "The others involved?" "The Secretary of Defense has personally authorized the operation. Teams are moving into position now. By this time tomorrow, everyone connected to Midnight Sun will be in custody or confirmed neutralized." For the first time, something like relief flickered across Elena's face. "Then it wasn't for nothing." "No, Captain. Their sacrifice was not in vain." Hawthorne gestured toward the facility. "There are people inside who need to hear what really happened." "Are you prepared for that?" Elena considered the question for a long moment. "Is that an order, General? A request?" "These trainees deserve to understand the true cost of integrity in our profession." Elena looked toward the training facility, where young soldiers were learning to be the best versions of themselves, unaware of how easily the system could turn on them. "For the record, ma'am, I didn't come back for redemption or reinstatement." "I know why you came back, Captain," Hawthorne replied quietly. "For the same reason you survived when the others didn't, to ensure that justice was served." An hour later, the facility's main briefing room was packed beyond capacity. Trainees sat at rigid attention as General Hawthorne addressed them from the podium, with Elena standing motionless to her right. "What I'm about to share is classified at the highest levels," Hawthorne began. "By presidential order, that classification has been temporarily suspended for this briefing only." The general activated the room's projection system, displaying tactical maps and mission parameters that few in the audience had ever seen. Operation Midnight Sun was designed to extract 3 intelligence assets from this compound in Romania. Captain Vasquez commanded a 6-person team selected for their exceptional capabilities. The display showed night vision footage from helmet cameras, grainy, green-tinged images that carried the weight of tragedy. This footage comes from Captain Vasquez's personal recording device. Standard procedure requires all operators to maintain backup recordings separate from central command systems. The room watched in absolute silence as the mission unfolded before their eyes. The team's methodical approach to the compound. The moment they breached the main building, expecting to find hostages. The instant recognition on the point man's face when he realized they had walked into a perfectly prepared killing ground. The footage showed precision fire erupting from all directions, operators falling despite perfect tactical positioning and years of experience. Elena's voice calling desperately for extraction on a radio that returned only static interference. "The intelligence was manufactured," Hawthorne explained, her voice carrying across the silent room. "The hostages never existed. The entire operation was designed to eliminate this specific team because of another mission they had completed the month before, one where they had acquired evidence of high-level corruption within certain military contracting companies." The footage continued, showing Elena fighting desperately to reach her fallen teammates, performing field medical procedures under continuous enemy fire, ultimately being forced to retreat when ammunition ran critically low and enemy reinforcements arrived. Captain Vasquez survived by using techniques she had learned from Master Sergeant Grimwald years earlier during her initial training. She evaded capture for 6 days while injured, eventually reaching an extraction point where she was recovered by friendly forces. The general paused the footage, letting the weight of what they'd witnessed settle over the audience. What happened next was equally criminal. Upon her return, Captain Vasquez was immediately detained. Her report was classified and buried. Evidence was fabricated suggesting she had compromised the mission through negligence. Her security clearance was revoked, her medals stripped, her career destroyed. Hawthorne turned to face Elena directly, her voice carrying the weight of institutional shame. Captain Vasquez, on behalf of the United States military, I formally apologize for the injustice you endured. She removed a velvet case from her aide's hands and opened it to reveal the Distinguished Service Cross. Effective immediately, your rank, decorations, and security clearances are fully reinstated, with appropriate back pay and benefits. As Hawthorne pinned the medal to Elena's uniform, the assembled trainees rose as one in a spontaneous standing ovation that seemed to shake the building's foundations. Elena remained at rigid attention, her expression controlled, though those closest could see the slight moisture in her eyes. When the general stepped back from the podium, she gestured for Elena to speak. The room fell silent with anticipation. I didn't come back for this, Elena said simply, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed auditorium. I came back because I made a promise to 5 operators who didn't return home. I promised them that the truth would come out, that their families would know they died with honor, not because of negligence or betrayal. She looked across the room, making eye contact with several trainees. The lesson here isn't about marksmanship or impossible shots. It's about integrity. It's about standing by your team no matter what happens, even when they're gone, even when the entire system turns against you. Elena paused, gathering her thoughts. Master Sergeant Grimwald was right about one thing. Physics is physics. But he was wrong about everything else. There are no impossible shots, only insufficient preparation and lack of commitment. The real impossibility is abandoning the people who trust you with their lives. After the ceremony, the formal proceedings transitioned into something more personal. General Hawthorne opened the floor for questions, creating a rare opportunity for direct engagement between trainees and living military legend. Captain Vasquez, one trainee asked nervously, how did you maintain your skills during these 3 years? A ghost of a smile crossed Elena's face. I worked security consultation for allied nations who didn't ask questions about my status with our military. Their loss became someone else's gain. Another trainee raised his hand. The shot today at 4,200 meters? How much of that was skill versus calculation? All shooting is calculation, Elena replied. The difference between good and exceptional is how many variables you account for. Most marksmen consider wind, elevation, and distance. I was trained to factor in temperature gradients, barometric pressure variations, the Coriolis effect from Earth's rotation, humidity changes, and even the spin drift of the bullet over extended flight time. Morrison had remained silent until now, but finally raised his hand. Captain, my sister wrote to me about you before that last operation. She said you could read wind patterns by watching dust move half a mile away. Elena's composure faltered for the first time since entering the briefing room. Sarah was the heart of our communications network. She saved the entire team twice that night, including taking rounds that were meant for me. The official report said I abandoned my people. She paused, struggling with the memory. The truth is, they never abandoned me. Even when they were dying, they were covering my extract so someone could bring back the intelligence we'd gathered. Morrison's voice was quiet but steady. That's why I requested transfer to this program, ma'am. I needed to understand what really happened to my sister. Elena stepped down from the podium and approached Morrison. From her pocket, she withdrew a worn challenge coin and placed it in his palm. Sarah gave this to me the day I took command of the team. Said it was her lucky charm from basic training. I've carried it every day since. The coin was simple brass, worn smooth by handling, with Sarah Morrison's name engraved on one side and communications on the other. The formal report said she died instantly, Elena continued, her voice barely above a whisper. The truth is, she held that radio position for 23 minutes after taking her first hit, coordinating our defensive actions and calling for backup that never came. She died doing her job, protecting her team. The room had grown so quiet that the air conditioning seemed loud. Morrison stared at the challenge coin in his palm, his eyes bright with unshed tears. General Hawthorne stepped forward, signaling to her aides who produced bottles of water for everyone present. "In our tradition," she said, raising her bottle, "we toast those who have gone before us. Captain Vasquez, would you do the honors?" Elena raised her bottle, her voice clear and strong despite the emotion underlying it. "This round's on me until Valhalla." The assembled soldiers repeated the toast in unison, "Until Valhalla." Later that evening, as the desert sun painted the sky in shades of crimson and gold, Elena stood alone at the edge of the training ground, looking toward the distant ridge where she had made her impossible shot. The wind had died to almost nothing, and the silence was profound in the way that only desert nights could provide. General Hawthorne approached quietly, stopping at a respectful distance that honored Elena's need for solitude while making herself available for conversation. "The paperwork is complete," Hawthorne said softly. "Full reinstatement, backdated 3 years. The president sends his personal apologies and asks if you would consider returning to active duty." Elena turned to face her, expression thoughtful. "In what capacity?" "Your choice. Command of the Advanced Sniper School, Special Operations, even a staff position developing training protocols. Your experiences, both operational and afterward, give you a unique perspective on what works and what doesn't in our system." Elena looked back toward the training facility, where lights were beginning to appear in windows as the base settled into its evening routine. Those trainees deserve better than what we had. Better preparation, better leadership, better institutional support when things go wrong. "Is that a yes, Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez?" Hawthorne asked with a slight smile. Elena raised an eyebrow. "Lieutenant Colonel?" "Promotion papers were signed this afternoon, backdated to when you should have been promoted if your career hadn't been derailed by corruption. Consider it partial compensation for 3 years of injustice." For the first time that day, Elena laughed, a sound like water over stones, rusty from disuse but genuine. "You were confident I'd accept." "I was confident you'd do what serves the greater good, regardless of personal cost. You've demonstrated that repeatedly." Elena nodded once, decision made. "I'll take the training command, but I want to rebuild the program from the ground up. New protocols, new standards, new approaches to identifying and preventing the kind of institutional rot that nearly destroyed my team." "Done," Hawthorne said immediately. "You'll have full autonomy and whatever resources you need." The general paused, then added quietly, "There's one more thing. The families of your team members have been waiting 3 years to hear the truth from someone who was there. They're on secure video conference in the command center. Would you be willing to speak with them?" Elena's expression remained controlled, but emotion flickered behind her eyes like heat lightning. "I've been waiting 3 years to tell them what really happened." For the next hour, Elena provided detailed accounts of Operation Midnight Sun to people who had been left with nothing but lies and official condolences. She explained how each operator had fought with extraordinary courage, how they had realized they were betrayed but continued the mission anyway, how they had sacrificed themselves to ensure that at least one person survived to expose the truth. "Your spouses, your children, your siblings," she concluded, looking into cameras that connected her to families scattered across the country. "They died with honor. Not because of my negligence, as the official report claimed, but because they were betrayed by the very system they had sworn to serve and protect. I made a promise to them that night, that I would find out who was responsible and ensure that justice was served. Today, that promise was fulfilled." When the video conference ended, Elena remained in the command center, emotionally drained but somehow lighter than she had been in years. The weight of unspoken truth, of carrying blame that belonged to others, had finally been lifted from her shoulders. Morrison entered quietly, having been granted permission to speak with his sister's commander privately. "Lieutenant Colonel," he said, standing at attention. "At ease, Specialist," Elena replied. "Your sister would be proud of you." "Permission to speak freely, ma'am?" "Granted. I joined the military because I wanted to understand what happened to Sarah. I stayed because I wanted to become the kind of operator she was, someone who put the mission and the team ahead of everything else. Now that I know the truth. He paused, gathering his courage. I'd like to request assignment to your new training program. Elena studied him thoughtfully, seeing echoes of his sister in his determination and integrity. It won't be easy. I intend to set standards higher than anything currently in the books. The kind of training that produces operators who can handle not just tactical challenges, but moral ones. Morrison's expression was resolute. With respect, ma'am, that's exactly why I'm asking. Elena nodded once. Request granted, Sergeant Morrison. His eyes widened. Sergeant? Battlefield promotion. General Hawthorne approved it 10 minutes ago. I need an NCO I can trust, someone who understands what we're building here and why it matters. 1 year later, the Mojave facility had been renamed the Midnight Sun Memorial Training Center. Lieutenant Colonel Elena Vasquez's restructured program had quickly gained a reputation as the most rigorous and innovative sniper training in the military. Graduates were in high demand across all special operations units, known for both technical excellence and uncompromising integrity. The impossible target that once stood at 4,200 meters had been replaced by 6 identical steel plates, each bearing the name of a fallen Midnight Sun operator. Hitting any one of these targets was now the final qualification requirement for program completion, a standard that seemed impossible until students learned that with proper preparation, dedication, and respect for their craft, the impossible became merely difficult. On this particular morning, Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez stood before her newest class of trainees, the rising sun casting long shadows across the training ground that stretched toward the Memorial Ridge. Distance isn't just about physics, she explained, pacing slowly before the assembled marksmen. It's about patience, about reading the entire environment between you and your objective. Sometimes the hardest targets aren't the farthest away. They're the ones hiding in plain sight, disguised as friends and allies. She gestured toward the distant memorial plates. Yesterday, each of you attempted the qualification shot. 4 of you succeeded on your first try, the highest number we've ever recorded for an initial class attempt. The others will have another opportunity next week, and as many attempts after that as needed. We don't graduate anyone until they can consistently make the shot that matters. Sergeant Morrison joined her at the front of the group, now wearing the stripes of his new rank with quiet pride. Today, we're adding complications. Variable winds at multiple elevations, temperature gradients, and atmospheric pressure changes. The conditions you'll face in the field won't wait for perfect weather. The trainees listened with intense focus. In the years since taking command, Elena had transformed not just the program's approach to marksmanship, but its entire philosophy. Students learned not just to shoot, but to think critically, to question orders that didn't make sense, to protect their teammates from threats that wore friendly uniforms. After dismissing the day's training session, Elena walked alone to the ridge where she had made her impossible shot 12 months earlier. 6 stone memorials now stood in a semicircle facing the setting sun, each bearing the name, rank, and call sign of an operator lost to betrayal and corruption. It had become her daily ritual to visit this place, to spend a few minutes in silence with the memory of people who had trusted her with their lives. She placed a single rifle cartridge on each stone, a sniper's tribute to fallen comrades. As she completed the ritual, she became aware of someone waiting at a respectful distance. A young recruit stood at parade rest, clearly nervous about approaching the legendary commander, but determined nonetheless. Lieutenant Colonel Vasquez, the recruit began. Permission to ask a question, ma'am? Elena nodded. Granted. Is it true what they say? That you made that shot from over 4 miles away with a standard-issue rifle? Elena studied the eager face before her, recognizing the same hunger for excellence that had once driven her to push beyond. Established limitations. The rifle was custom-built, she corrected gently, but the distance was accurate. What was going through your mind when you took the shot? Elena looked back toward the memorial stones, their surfaces warm from the day's sun. I wasn't thinking about the shot itself. I was thinking about a promise I had made to 6 operators who trusted me with their lives, that no matter how long it took, the truth would come out. That their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten or twisted by people with their own agendas. She turned back to the recruit, noting the intense attention with which he listened to every word. The shot doesn't matter. What matters is standing by your people in the field and afterward. Some targets you can see clearly. Others take time to identify and engage. But justice, like a well-aimed bullet, always finds its mark eventually. The recruit nodded seriously, absorbing the lesson with the gravity it deserved. Now, Elena said, with the ghost of a smile that made her seem younger than her years, if you want to learn how to make shots like that consistently, report to the long-range qualification course at 0500 tomorrow. Sergeant Morrison and I will be running a special session for anyone willing to put in the extra work. As the recruit hurried away, Elena remained by the memorial stones, watching the desert transform in the fading light. In the distance, she could see the training facility buzzing with activity. The next generation of elite marksmen preparing for whatever challenges awaited them in a world where the greatest threats often came from within their own ranks. She placed her hand briefly on the center memorial stone, the one bearing her sister-in-arms Sarah Morrison's name. "We're making it count," she said quietly, "just like you asked." Then she turned and walked back toward the facility, ready to continue the work of transforming tragedy into legacy, of ensuring that what had been broken could be rebuilt stronger and more resistant to corruption than before. The wind picked up slightly as she walked, and without conscious thought, she noted its direction and velocity, a sniper's instinct that would never fade. But for the first time in 3 years, the weight of the past felt lighter on her shoulders. Justice had found its mark. The impossible shot had been made not just at 4,200 meters of desert air, but across 3 years of lies, betrayal, and institutional corruption. And somewhere in the gathering darkness, she believed, 6 warriors were finally at peace. The ghost had returned from the shadows, not seeking vengeance, but ensuring that the light of truth could never again be extinguished by those who would sacrifice honor for profit. In the end, that was the most impossible shot of all, and the only one that truly mattered.